Brennan followed tracks through 6 miles of frozen wilderness into a limestone cave that should have been empty. Her dog refused to go inside. What Sarah found beneath the stone wasn't an animal. It was evidence of something far worse. The game warden's offer made no sense from the start. Sarah stood in the cluttered office at Pinecrest Station, staring at the topographical maps spread across the scarred wooden desk. Warden Victoria Landry tapped a thick finger on an unmarked section of territory in the northern Cascade Range, her breath coming in short, careful bursts. "I need someone to investigate unusual wildlife activity," Landry said, her eyes fixed somewhere past Sarah's shoulder, focusing on the faded wildlife posters on the wall behind her. Reports of something killing livestock in the high country. Strange tracks. For weeks of work. $3,000, cash payment. Sarah had been guiding hunters and researchers through these mountains for 12 years, and she'd never seen Victoria Landry this nervous. The warden was built like an oak tree, former Army Ranger, the kind of woman who maintained eye contact like it was a competitive sport. But today, those steel-gray eyes kept sliding away, and her jaw was clenched so tight Sarah could see the muscle jumping beneath her weathered skin. "What kind of tracks?" Sarah asked, leaning forward. "That's what I need you to find out." Landry slid a manila folder across the desk. The paper was new, too crisp, like it had been prepared specifically for this moment. "Contract's simple. You investigate the northern ridgeline territory, you report back to me directly. No park service. No forest rangers. Just me." The money was 3 times what Sarah usually made in a month. Her sister's nursing home bills had been crushing her since the diagnosis. Early onset Alzheimer's at 52. A cruel twist that had stolen Jennifer's memories and left Sarah with debts that multiplied like weeds. The state facility was a nightmare. The private home where Jenny actually received care cost $4,200 a month, and insurance covered barely a quarter of it. She should have asked more questions. Should have wondered why Landry wanted this investigation kept off the books. Should have noticed the way the warden's hand trembled slightly when Sarah reached for the pen, the way Landry's coffee sat untouched and cold on the desk. But $3,000 was $3,000. It was 2 months of keeping Jenny somewhere clean and safe, somewhere the staff knew her name and held her hand when she forgot where she was. Sarah signed on the dotted line, her signature a careful scrawl that felt heavier than ink on paper. Landry took the contract immediately, folded it once, and slipped it into her desk drawer without another glance. "Start Monday. Here's a satellite phone. Check in every evening at 7. No exceptions. What if I don't have signal?" "You'll have signal where you're going." Landry's voice was flat, final. "Just make sure you call." The situation. 3 days before that meeting, Sarah had been sitting at her kitchen table in the small cabin outside Timberline, calculator in one hand, a stack of bills in the other. The numbers blurred together after the 3rd time she added them up, but the result never changed. Negative $847 in her checking account. Rent due in 5 days. Jenny's facility sent reminders every week now, polite at first, then increasingly firm. "We understand this is difficult, but payment must be received by the 1st of the month to continue services." What they meant was, pay up, or we move your sister to the state home, where 3 nurses handle 40 patients, and the smell of unwashed bodies and institutional disinfectant burns your throat. Sarah's guide business had been slow. Climate change meant unpredictable seasons. Hunters canceling because elk migrations shifted, researchers finding their funding cut, adventure tourists choosing cheaper destinations. She had her skills and her reputation, but reputation didn't cover a $4,200 monthly bill. Her phone had buzzed that Tuesday afternoon. Landry's name on the screen. They'd worked together maybe a dozen times over the years, enough to build professional respect, but not friendship. Landry enforced wildlife protection laws. Sarah knew every trail, every shelter, every water source in 300 square miles of wilderness. "Brennan, need to see you Friday. Have a job. Good money." Sarah had driven the 40 minutes to Pinecrest Station with cautious hope fluttering in her chest. Good money. She could use good money. She should have known that good money always came with strings attached. Sometimes those strings were chains. First visit to the territory. Sarah drove north before sunrise on Monday, her Jeep groaning over old logging roads that had been slowly reclaimed by the forest. Beside her in the passenger seat, her German Shepherd mix, Dakota, sat alert. her brown eyes tracking the dark shapes of trees sliding past in the pre-dawn gloom. Dakota had been with Sarah for 9 years, since the day Sarah found her half-starved and limping on a mountain trail. The dog had tracked injured deer through whiteout blizzards, alerted Sarah to black bears before they became problems, and once pulled her back from a hidden ravine that would have meant a fatal fall. If Sarah went into the wilderness, Dakota went with her. It wasn't negotiable. The coordinates Landry provided led to a section of the Cascade Range Sarah had only visited twice, both times years ago. Remote, brutal terrain. The kind of country where one wrong step meant a broken ankle and a very long crawl back to civilization. She parked where the road became impassable and checked her gear methodically. Rifle, pack, GPS, first aid kit, the satellite phone. The phone felt strange in her hand, heavier than it should be. Landry's instructions echoed, 7 p.m. every night. No exceptions. Sarah clipped it to her belt and shouldered her pack. The tracks appeared 4 hours into her hike. She was following a game trail near a half-frozen stream when Dakota stopped abruptly, her whole body going rigid. Sarah crouched beside her, following the dog's gaze to the snow ahead. Tracks, large ones, pressed deep into snow that had fallen 3 days prior according to the Weather Service reports. Sarah knelt, studying them carefully. Canine in general shape, but wrong in almost every detail. The toe spread was too wide. The gait pattern was irregular, dragging in places, too purposeful in others. Whatever made these moved with determination, but not like any wolf, coyote, or mountain lion Sarah had tracked in 12 years of wilderness work. Dakota growled, a sound that started low in her chest and built until it was almost a whine. Her hackles stood in a ridge along her spine. "Easy, girl," Sarah murmured, but her own instincts were screaming warnings. In all their years together, Dakota had never reacted like this. She followed the tracks northeast, climbing through dense stands of Douglas fir and over moss-covered boulders slick with ice. The temperature dropped as she gained elevation. Her breath came in white clouds. The sun climbed toward noon, but the shadows seemed to deepen rather than recede. That's when she saw the cave. It was tucked into a cliff face, partially hidden by a rockfall and twisted mountain hemlock. The entrance was roughly 10 feet across, a dark mouth in the gray limestone. The tracks led directly inside, the snow at the threshold disturbed and trampled. Sarah approached cautiously, every sense alert. Dakota stopped 15 feet from the entrance, her body locked in place, trembling. "What is it?" Sarah asked quietly. The dog wouldn't move forward. Her ears were flat against her skull, her tail tucked, her gaze fixed on that black opening with an intensity that made Sarah's skin prickle. Sarah had seen Dakota face down a charging bull moose without backing up. She'd watched the dog hold her ground while a mother bear bluff-charged 3 times. But now, Dakota looked genuinely terrified. Sarah took another step toward the cave and felt it immediately, something wrong with the air itself. Not quite a smell, though there was something metallic and stale underneath. It was more like atmospheric pressure changing, like standing too close to high-voltage power lines, a sensation that made her teeth ache and her vision blur slightly at the edges. She pulled her flashlight from her pack and clicked it on, aiming the beam into the darkness. The cave descended at a steep angle. The light caught on wet stone walls, uneven rocky floor, puddles that reflected like black mirrors. And there, just at the far reach of her flashlight's beam, something caught the light and threw it back, smooth, reflective, definitely not natural stone. Sarah's hand moved instinctively toward the satellite phone. She should call Landry right now. Report the cave. Report the strange tracks. Get instructions. But something stopped her. The warden's nervous energy during their meeting. The insistence on private communication only. The way this entire job felt carefully orchestrated, like pieces moved on a board Sarah couldn't quite see. She turned off the flashlight and stepped back. Dakota immediately relaxed, her tail lifting slightly, though her eyes stayed locked on that dark entrance. "All right," Sarah said quietly, her voice swallowed by the vast silence of the mountains. "We'll come back tomorrow. Better prepared." That night, camped a mile and a half from the cave in a sheltered depression between 2 ridges, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay in her sleeping bag, Dakota pressed warm against her side, staring up at stars so bright and cold they looked like ice chips scattered across black velvet. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that reflective surface deep in the cave's darkness. Not stone, not ice, not anything that belonged in a natural limestone formation. Something else. Something placed there deliberately, and the tracks leading to it hadn't been made by any animal she knew. The discovery. Sarah returned to the cave at first light, carrying extra rope, batteries, water, and a better flashlight, a professional-grade LED that could punch light 500 feet. Dakota came with her, but reluctantly, staying so close that Sarah kept stumbling over her. The cave looked different in morning light. The entrance seemed smaller somehow, less threatening, just another hole in ancient rock. But when Sarah crossed the threshold, that wrongness returned immediately, pressing against her chest like invisible hands. She moved slowly, methodically, her light sweeping across walls that wept condensation in slow, steady drips. The floor sloped downward at maybe 30 degrees, the tracks continuing deeper into the mountain. Water sounds echoed from somewhere ahead, dripping, flowing, the patient work of stone being carved by time. After 70 feet, the narrow passage opened suddenly into a wider chamber, maybe 40 feet across. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above her, and the air felt different here, less stale, more like circulation from deeper tunnels. That's when Sarah saw them, and her heart stopped. Crates, dozens of them, stacked in careful rows against the far wall. Military surplus, dark green, marked with faded stencils she couldn't quite read in the shifting light. And beside them, equipment that had no business being in a wilderness cave. Generators, battery packs, LED work lights, coils of heavy-duty cable snaking deeper into the cave system like industrial veins. This wasn't a wildlife investigation. This was something else entirely. Something Landry had known about all along. Sarah moved closer, her boots silent on the damp stone floor. The crates were secured with military-grade locks, but one had been forced open, its lid hanging crooked. She lifted it carefully with one hand, her flashlight in the other. Inside, vacuum-sealed plastic packages, dozens of them, filled with white crystalline powder. Professional packaging. Industrial quantities. Each package marked with a small symbol she didn't recognize. 3 interlocking circles, hand-drawn in black marker. Her stomach turned to ice. Not wildlife. Not some mysterious predator killing livestock. Drugs. A distribution hub hidden on federal land, camouflaged by fabricated wildlife reports that would keep legitimate investigators away. And Victoria Landry had sent her here, had specifically hired her, knowing what she'd find. But why? Sarah's hand went to the satellite phone, then froze. If Landry was involved, if this entire job was cover for something darker, then calling would be signing her own death warrant. She'd be confirming she'd found exactly what they either wanted her to find or desperately needed to keep hidden. Either option ended badly for her. She turned to leave and heard it. Voices, distant but approaching from the direction she'd entered. Vehicle engines somewhere outside, straining up the old logging road. Multiple people moving with purpose. Sarah killed her light instantly and pressed her back against the cave wall, her heart hammering. Dakota was at the passage entrance, a low continuous growl rumbling from her throat, and Sarah grabbed the dog's collar just as shadows appeared in the morning light filtering through the entrance. 4 people, 3 men and 1 woman, all armed with rifles, moving with the casual confidence of people who knew exactly where they were going and what they'd find there. Sarah held her breath, held Dakota still, and watched through a gap in the rock formation as they entered the cave, their flashlight beams sweeping across the chamber she'd just been standing in. First confrontation. Sarah waited until their voices and footsteps faded deeper into the cave system before moving. She and Dakota slipped toward the entrance silently, staying low, keeping to the shadows. Every stone she stepped on sounded impossibly loud in her own ears, but the voices ahead covered any noise. She made it to the entrance, made it 20 yards into the trees. Was starting to think she'd actually gotten away clean when a voice called out behind her. Stop right there. Sarah didn't stop. She ran. Dakota bolted ahead of her, sure-footed on the steep terrain. Boots crashed through undergrowth behind them. Shouts. A gunshot cracked through the morning air, impossibly loud, the bullet smacking into a tree trunk to Sarah's right and sending bark fragments flying. She dove behind a massive fallen log, Dakota pressed against her side, both of them breathing hard. Her mind raced through options, finding nothing good. They'd seen her. They knew someone had found the operation. And she was miles from help, in terrain where her body might not be found until spring thaw. Another voice, closer now. Just stop running. We need to talk. Sarah recognized that voice. She'd heard it 3 days ago, calm and professional across a cluttered desk. Victoria Landry. The warden stepped into view between the trees, her rifle held low but ready, flanked by 2 of the armed men. Landry's face was calm, almost regretful. Sarah, Landry said quietly, I really hoped you'd be smarter about this. You knew? Sarah's voice came out harsh, breathless. You sent me here knowing what I'd find. Landry sighed, a sound of genuine tiredness. I sent you here to verify the cave was still secure after some hikers reported strange tracks. We needed someone local, someone good at their job, someone who could check things quietly. She paused. And someone who wouldn't be immediately missed if complications arose. Complications. Sarah's hand tightened on her rifle, still pressed against the log. That's what you call murder? I call it risk management. Landry's voice was matter-of-fact, almost businesslike. This operation has been running for 6 years without incident. We're careful, professional. But those hikers and their photos threatened everything. So we needed verification from someone who understood tracking. You were perfect for it. And now you have a choice. Landry took a step closer. You walk away. You forget what you saw. I pay you $5,000, enough for 3 months of your sister's care, enough to catch your breath. You tell anyone who asks that you investigated, found nothing unusual, end of story. Sarah's mind flashed to Jennifer, to her sister's confused face the last time she visited, the way Jenny had called her mom, and asked when she could go home to a house they'd sold 5 years ago. Or, Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer, or you try to report this, and you have an unfortunate accident in the mountains. Solo hiker, treacherous terrain. Tragic, but not uncommon. Landry's expression didn't change. We're 2 hours from the nearest road, Sarah. Think about your sister. Think about who takes care of her if you're gone. The 2 men flanking Landry shifted their positions, hands moving toward their rifles. Dakota's growl turned into a snarl, her body coiled and ready. Sarah thought about Jennifer, about the nursing home bills, about the fact that a bullet out here, in this remote wilderness, would mean her body might feed the scavengers before anyone found it. But she also thought about her parents, both gone now, about the values they'd taught her, about the woman she saw in the mirror every morning and whether she could live with that woman if she took this money. I'm not taking your money, Sarah said quietly, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. And I'm not staying quiet. Landry's face hardened like cooling stone. Then you just chose wrong. Sarah raised her rifle as the 2 men brought their weapons up, and Dakota launched forward with a snarl that echoed through the frozen forest like a promise of violence. The standoff had begun, and Sarah knew with absolute certainty that everything she'd believed about this job, about Landry, about the safety of these mountains, had been a carefully constructed lie. And somewhere deep in that cave, evidence of a conspiracy sat waiting, evidence that powerful people would kill to keep buried. The question was whether she'd live long enough to expose it. Sarah Brennan had followed mysterious tracks to a cave in the remote Cascade Mountains, only to discover a massive drug operation hidden on federal land. Warden Victoria Landry, the woman who hired her, stood with armed men offering Sarah a choice. Take $5,000 and stay silent, or die in these mountains. Sarah refused the money. Now, with guns pointed at her and her dog Dakota ready to attack, she had seconds to decide whether to fight or run. The gunshot that should have killed Sarah never came. Instead, Dakota launched herself at the nearest gunman with a ferocity that turned the forest into chaos. The man went down screaming, his rifle firing wildly into the canopy. Sarah rolled right, came up running, and Dakota was beside her instantly, blood on her muzzle, but moving fast. More shots, bark exploding from trees. Sarah zigzagged through the dense forest, using every trick 12 years in these mountains had taught her. She knew this terrain. They didn't. Behind her, Landry's voice cut through the chaos. Don't kill her yet. We need to know who she told. That one sentence told Sarah everything. They weren't sure if she'd contacted anyone. That uncertainty was the only thing keeping her alive. She ran for 20 minutes, Dakota matching her stride, until the sounds of pursuit faded. Then she found a dense thicket, crawled inside, and finally let herself shake. Her hands trembled as she pulled out the satellite phone. But who could she call? Landry was the law out here. The Park Service reported to her. Local police were 40 miles away and would contact the warden's office first. Sarah needed someone outside the system, someone Landry couldn't reach. Her sister Jennifer's doctor, Dr. Patricia Okonkwo at Clearwater Memory Care. Sharp, principled, the kind of woman who'd fought insurance companies for her patients. Sarah dialed with shaking fingers. Dr. Okonkwo. The voice was clipped, professional. Patricia, it's Sarah Brennan, Jennifer's sister. I need you to listen carefully and not ask questions yet. Silence. Then, I'm listening. Sarah spoke quickly, quietly, explaining everything. The cave, the drugs, Landry's involvement, the armed men. If something happens to me, if I don't contact you by tomorrow night, you need to call the state police. Not local. State. Tell them to investigate Warden Victoria Landry and the Northern Ridgeline Cave System. Sarah, you need to get out of there now. I'm trying, but I need insurance first. I'm going back to that cave to get proof, photos, evidence they can't deny. Then I'll extract. That's insane. It's the only way Jennifer stays safe. Sarah's voice cracked. If they think I talk to people, if they think killing me creates more problems than it solves, maybe they let me walk. But I need leverage first. Dr. Okonkwo was quiet for a long moment. 24 hours. If I don't hear from you, I'm calling everyone. State police, FBI, news stations. Everyone. Thank you. Sarah ended the call and looked at Dakota. One more trip into that cave, girl. Then we're done. Gathering evidence. Sarah waited until dusk, using the fading light and her knowledge of the terrain to circle back toward the cave. She moved like smoke through the forest, Dakota silent at her side. 2 guards stood at the cave entrance now, smoking cigarettes, rifles slung casually. Overconfident. They thought she'd run, put distance between herself and this place. Sarah found a deer trail that led to an outcropping above the cave. She'd noticed it that morning, a narrow ledge that gave access to what looked like a secondary entrance, probably a vent hole in the limestone. It took her 30 minutes to reach it, crawling on her belly, Dakota waiting below. The opening was tight, barely wide enough for her shoulders, but she squeezed through into a narrow chimney that dropped 15 feet into the main chamber. She used her rope, descended slowly, and found herself behind the stacked crates. Voices echoed from deeper in the cave, at least 4 people, maybe more. She worked fast, pulling out her phone, photographing everything. The crates, the markings, the equipment, the packages. She opened 3 more crates, documenting different symbols, different packaging. Evidence of a sophisticated operation. Then she heard it. Landry's voice, clear and close. Doesn't matter if she called someone. We move the product tonight, collapse the cave entrance, and relocate. By the time anyone investigates, there's nothing here but rocks. Another voice, male, rough, and the girl? Find her. Make it look like an animal attack. Mountain lion. We've set those up before. Sarah's blood turned to ice. She'd walked into something worse than a drug operation. These people had killed before and made it look like wildlife accidents. How many tragic hiking deaths had actually been murders? She needed to move. Now, the confrontation. Sarah made it to the rope, started climbing, and heard the shout below. There, in the chimney. Gunshots. Bullets ricocheting off stone. Sarah hauled herself up with desperate strength, Dakota barking furiously from the ledge above. She rolled onto the outcropping as hands grabbed for her ankles, yanked her legs free, and ran. But this time, she wasn't running away. She was running toward the old ranger station, 3 miles east. Abandoned for years, but built on a hilltop with clear sight lines. Defensible. And it had something Landry's people wouldn't expect. A backup radio system from the 1980s that operated on emergency frequencies the old rangers had used. If it still worked, she could broadcast to every ranger station, every emergency service, every pilot in range. She reached the station as full darkness fell, Dakota limping now. She'd been grazed by a bullet, but was still moving. Sarah barricaded the door, found the old radio in a locked cabinet, and prayed. The equipment was ancient, covered in dust, but when she connected the battery pack from her GPS, a small light flickered on. She grabbed the microphone. This is Sarah Brennan broadcasting on emergency frequency. I'm at the old Ridgeline Ranger Station. I have evidence of a drug operation on federal land involving Warden Victoria Landry. Armed suspects pursuing. I need immediate assistance. Static. Then, this is Cascade Air Rescue. We copy. State police have been alerted. Help is coming. Sarah nearly sobbed with relief. But Landry's people were already at the door, pounding, shouting. She had to hold them off for, how long? 20 minutes? An hour? She used furniture to reinforce the barricade, found an old fire axe, and waited beside Dakota. The dog's breathing was labored, but her eyes were alert, ready. The door splintered. Wood cracked. Sarah raised the axe. Then she heard it. Helicopter rotors. Spotlights blazing through the windows. A loudspeaker. This is state police. Drop your weapons. You are surrounded. Resolution. The arrests happened fast. Landry tried to run and made it 50 yards before they tackled her. The men at the station surrendered when they realized how many police had arrived. Sarah sat on the station steps, holding Dakota, watching emergency lights paint the forest red and blue. A paramedic cleaned the dog's wound while a state trooper took Sarah's statement. Dr. Okonkwo had called everyone, just like she promised. When Sarah hadn't checked in after 2 hours, the doctor had contacted state police, FBI, and 3 news organizations. The pressure had forced an immediate response. The cave yielded more than drugs. They found records, encrypted laptops, evidence of a network that reached into 3 states. Landry had been taking money for 6 years, using her position to protect distributors. 17 accidental deaths in those 6 years were reopened as suspicious. 3 weeks later, Sarah sat in Jennifer's room at Clearwater Memory Care. Her sister was having a good day, lucid, smiling. You look tired, Jennifer said. Long month. Sarah squeezed her hand. But you're okay? Yeah, I'm okay. The reward money from the federal case had come through, $50,000. Enough for 2 years of Jennifer's care. Enough to breathe. The guy business was picking up too, apparently, being the person who exposed a massive conspiracy made for good publicity. Dakota lay at Sarah's feet, fully healed, already restless for their next trip into the mountains. Sarah thought about those tracks she'd followed, about how they'd led not to an animal, but to something far more dangerous, human corruption, greed, the willingness to kill for profit. But they'd also led to justice, to truth, to proof that one person with courage could make a difference. She stood, kissed Jennifer's forehead, and whistled for Dakota. The mountains were waiting. Thank you for following Sarah's journey. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of courage against impossible odds. Drop a comment telling us what story you'd like to see next. Your support means everything, and every subscription helps us bring you better content. Until next time, stay brave, and remember, sometimes the most dangerous predators walk on 2 legs.